Hey everybody, David here, and today I want to do my next video for which actors returned for this episode of What If? What If episode 5, titled What If Zombies? That's right. So I want to go through the list of actors that returned for this episode, just like I did for the last 4 episodes, or yeah, we're on episode 5. So let's get right into this. Who returned, who didn't return. I'll say this, a lot of actors returned for this episode. Most of the actors returned for the episodes that we have talked about for so far, except for, I think, episode 3, the one where the Avengers were getting knocked off one by one by Hank Pym. I think that was the only episode that had like a mixed bag of actors returning. So let's get right into it. Who returns? So, of course, Jeffrey Wright returns as the voice of the Watcher. He is the narrator of this show, so he is going to be returning in every episode. So Jeffrey Wright, no surprise here, returns. Now, who are the characters that are not in the movies that are taking over for the actors from the movies? So first up is Captain America. He was in this episode. Actually, a lot of characters were in this episode, but there were a lot of characters that didn't have speaking parts, so we're not going to count those ones. But Captain America did have a speaking part, and no, he was not voiced by Chris Evans. He was actually voiced by Josh Keaton, who voiced the role in the very first episode of the What If series. So he's obviously the guy who's taking over for Chris Evans in this series. Next up, we have Peter Parker, Spider-Man, who in the movies usually is portrayed by Tom Holland. Obviously, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire also play the character, but in the MCU, it is Tom Holland. But in this show, they couldn't get Tom Holland back, something that was hinted by one of the showrunners that might have been a Sony situation. But they did get a really good voice actor named Hudson Thames to take over the role, who I think did a really great job. I think out of all the replacement actors so far that we have gotten in this show, I think Hudson Thames really did the best job replacing the actor who plays him on screen. So yeah, hopefully there's been some really good ones. I think Josh Keaton was really good too. I think the actor who does the voice of Tony Stark in one of the previous episodes, and that most likely will be returning as well for another episode, I think he did a great job. But then you get some of your Liv Tylers and William Hurts, and they're like, whoa, that is way off. So to me anyways. So moving on, now let's get into the actors that have returned. There are a lot of them. So let's start off with Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw was in this episode, and yes, he was once again played by Tom Von Lawler. So that's good to know. He had a little bit of dialogue in this episode. He was also in the T'Challa episode, the one where he becomes Star-Lord. So that was pretty good that they got him back. Kurt from Ant-Man and the Wasp, he was in this episode. And yes, he is also played by David Dastmalchian in the movies, who did return for this role in this episode. It's no surprise he is a nerd when it comes to, in real life, he is a nerd when it comes to this comic book stuff, just like we are. And he's appeared in a lot of comic book based TV shows and movies, starting with The Dark Knight. He appeared in The Flash. He was also in Gotham. He was just recently in the Suicide Squad movie as Polka Dot Man. So if it comes to the comic book stuff, Marvel, DC, doesn't matter to him. He's enjoying himself, and it's always a pleasure to know that a fellow nerd gets to be in all of this stuff. It's something that we all dream of. Moving on, Sharon Carter was in this episode, and yes, it wasn't too long ago that Emily Van Camp played the character in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. She does return to do her voice, which was really cool, reuniting herself with one of her co-stars from that show, which I'll get to a little bit later. Next up is Akoye. Obviously, in this episode, she is once again played by Denai Guerrera, who was just in the T'Challa episode as well. She had a very one line, quick. It was quick. But I recognized her voice, and when I saw the credits, it confirmed it that yes, she was and I knew right there that they had to have her in another episode because they wouldn't just bring her back just for one line. She would have to come back to come on, more lines. And Akoye kicked ass in this episode. It was great to hear her. Moving next up is Happy Hogan. Happy Hogan was in this episode, Iron Man's faithful chauffeur, bodyguard. And yes, he was once again played by Jon Favreau. Not really too much of a surprise to me because Jon Favreau at this point is a Disney darling, if you will. He's, done the Jungle Book, the Lion King. He's doing the Mandalorian for them. He has a nice relationship with Marvel, obviously, because he kicked it off with Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2. So, I'm happy that Jon Favreau still comes back to play Happy Hogan because Happy is great, and I really did love the blam part when he was doing the sound effects of the blam from Iron Man's handgun thing, ray gun, whatever you want to call it. Now let's get into the bigger characters here, the superheroes that have returned. Scott Lang is back in this episode. We got to see him mostly as a head, and even though it looked like he was killed off right away, we find out that he actually survived. His head was in a tube, kind of reminded me of those the heads from Futurama where they were all frozen in a cryogenic tube. Yes, Paul Rudd does return to do the voice of Scott Lang, and you can tell that they let him improvise once in a while, so not too much. There were some lines that I was wondering, I wonder if that was actually written into the episode, or I wonder if they let him improvise here. So there you go. Scott, if you got a comedian on your roster, use them wisely. That's what I gotta say. Next up, Hope Van Dyne, also known as the Wasp, and yes, and Evangeline Lilly. I almost said Angelina Jolie. Evangeline Lilly, Canadian girl, did come back to do the voice of Hope Van Dyne, and I gotta say her scenes carried a lot of weight. So especially when she was having that heart-to-heart talk with Peter Parker, I thought definitely some of my favorite moments in the episode. As you know, I like a lot of emotional moments, especially when they're done really well. And I thought the heart-to-heart moments between her and Peter were really great. I just kind of wish that it was Tom Holland, even though Hudson Thames did a great job portraying the Peter Parker MCU character. There's always a nice part where it's the actual actor portraying the same character from the movies. Gives it that more rounded feel, connecting it back to the films. Moving on, Bucky Barnes was in this episode, aka the Winter Soldier, and yes, Sebastian Stan did return, reuniting with Sharon Carter's Emily Van Camp. So it was a little bit of a Falcon and Winter Soldier reunion. Almost could have had the trio because Falcon does show up, but he is not voiced by Anthony Mackie. But Sebastian Stan, it's always great to hear him again. So, and he also appeared in an earlier episode. He was in the very first episode as only Bucky Barnes before he became the Winter Soldier. So, moving on. We got Vision. Vision was back in this episode, and no surprise because he was just in WandaVision not too long ago. Paul Bettany reprises his role as the Vision, still in love with the Scarlet Witch, just a dead version. So it was a more twisted relationship, even more twisted than it was in WandaVision. I don't even know which way was worse. Was Wanda's way of bringing Vision back bad, or was Vision's way of bringing Scarlet Witch back, or keeping her alive, bad? I would say Vision, I think, went worse because he was feeding people, innocent people that he swore to protect. Vision was wacko in this episode, but it was great hearing Paul Bettany, I'll say that much. But hey, you'll do anything, I guess, for love, right? Moving on, we got T'Challa. T'Challa, we find out he survived the zombie attack from the beginning. That I thought, oh, that's all we're gonna get a Black Panther in this episode. But then we find out, no, he's still alive. And yes, Chadwick Boseman does once again return. We know he's going to be in 4 episodes. So this is the 2nd episode now. He returns to voice T'Challa. But instead of T'Challa being Star-Lord, he's T'Challa as Black Panther. So, but we are going to get a T'Challa Star-Lord again down the road, because I think some of these stories we're gonna see them merge somehow, or team up in a way. We're gonna get that Avengers type episode where we're gonna see these worlds collide somehow, and I think we are going to see Chadwick Boseman reprise the Star-Lord version of T'Challa one more time. I don't know when. We'll just have to wait and see. Finally, we got Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, in this episode. And yes, Mark Ruffalo, who took over the Edward Norton role, not only in the films, but in this show as well, returns to do his voice, this time in the proper movie that they were taking during, which was Avengers Infinity War. So he got to repeat some of his lines from that movie, just in a different way. It was great because the movie, this episode did focus from his point of view most of the time. And it was interesting because in some ways, Bruce Banner was kind of like maybe not the leader, because I guess that was more of Hope Van Dyne. She was really leading the team. But he was kind of like the second in command. And after she was killed, he had to take over. So, and he gave Peter Parker those words of wisdom. And Mark Ruffalo definitely he's an enjoyable actor to watch. You know, there's a reason I think he got casted as Bruce Banner. Not just because, you know, he's someone that could have a little bit of anger inside of him, but when he's calm and collective. And I think there were some words of wisdom there too, some heart in this episode with him that was really nice. I really did like when he said, when Peter didn't want to lose somebody, and his words were, then avenge us. And, you know, because they're the Avengers. So if we go down, do what's right and make us proud. Carry on the legacy. So I thought that was a nice moment. And most of it was because I think Mark Ruffalo did a good job really great job at voicing the role. And he's great when he plays it on screen too, which is what he usually does. So with that being said, tell me your thoughts, guys. Are you happy to see a lot of these actors returning in this episode? Who else do you want to see return that we haven't gotten yet? There's still a couple more episodes coming up. We know Michael B. Jordan is coming back, who will return in that episode. I have a feeling Leslie Bibb, who returned in a very brief role, just like Denai Guerrera did in the 2nd episode. I think we could see her pop up in that one, interviewing Tony Stark and whoever else. So we'll see. With that being said, I want to plug in my Patreon supporters right now. These are the people that support this channel and support me, and I have to thank them time and time again, because it is really awesome that people would, dedicate their time by donating to a monthly subscription. There's a $5 tier and a $10 tier. Right now, they both get you the same thing. You'll get an end credit at the end of each video, and a personal thank you by me, like you're seeing right now. So these 4 people right here, thank you very much. Look, if you're somebody that wants to help out, but you can't, you don't have the money or whatever to afford, maybe your parents won't let you, that's fine too. I don't want you to do anything that will get you in trouble. But you can help out the channel by also liking every video, watching every video, sending a link to people and letting people know about the channel. It's really tough to try to get people to give you that chance. And maybe if other people recommend the channel as well, maybe people will then be like curious and say, hey, if this guy likes it, maybe I'll like it too. Let's see what this guy has to say. Or maybe people want to know, but they just don't know what videos to look for that are telling them who was in this episode. I want to know what actors were in this episode. Here, check this guy's video. He tells you it all. Other things like that too. So with that being said, thank you for watching, guys. Thank you to my Patreon supporters one more time. Thank you very much. Your support means the world to me, so thank you. And with that being said, I want to end this here. Until next time, everybody, take care.